What is normalization, and should I be using it for my voiceover recordings? We're going to find out all about normalization in this video. We'll talk about what it is, exactly what it does to your audio. We'll talk about when you might use it for your voiceovers, and we'll talk about when you shouldn't use it and when it could actually cause problems. I'm Lenny B, voiceover audio engineer. Let's make your voice sound better. So as an audio engineer, my job is to really help you make a better emotional connection with your audience. I want whatever you say with your voice on the microphone, whatever you record, I want that message to really hit somebody in the heart. And one of the ways to make a better emotional connection when you're telling a story, no matter what it is, it could be for animation, it could be for an audiobook, it could be for a YouTube video. If your audio has a particular impact and it sounds good, you can hear the emotion, you can hear the change in somebody's feeling, you can hear what a smile sounds like, right, through the microphone, if you've got crystal clear quality, really good voice quality. And that's one of the things I like to do. My goal is to help you make a better connection. So one of the things that it comes up, and this is how we're connecting this to normalization, is that's one of the questions I get a lot. It's like, should I be normalizing? When should I normalize? How much do I normalize? Is it the best thing to do for my audio? And normalization really is very much connected to setting an optimal recording level. And so this is really connected to a new course that I have, one of the new courses I have. It's called Optimal Recording Levels for Voiceover. I'm going to put the link to that course in the description of this video. And, you know, I help all different types of voiceover talent, and I work with them and I get questions, and I've had questions for just the last several years that keep coming, and there's themes. And, you know, what I do is I try to say, wow, this is a big topic that needs to be resolved. This is really going to help people. And that's what I write the courses on. So it's really helping me come up with the right type of content to offer you. So one of the new courses is Optimal Recording Levels. I think it's it's really kind of fundamental. It's the foundation of getting a really good voiceover recording. So it's a very affordable course, and I think you're going to find a lot of value in it. Again, the link in the description. Okay, let me show you everything that you need to know about normalizing. Well, the first thing I want to talk about is signal flow, and that is the flow of signal that starts from your voice and it goes to your microphone, through your equipment, all the way to your recording, and eventually to your listeners' ears, right? Or the people that are consuming your content. At the very end of this process, it reaches them. So starting with your microphone, when you speak on your microphone, the sound pressure waves are captured by your mic, and it translates, the microphone translates your voice into a very low-level electrical signal. Now, this signal needs to be amplified, and that's what our preamps do. And we have preamps most of the time when you're working in voiceover. You've got a preamp in your audio interface. And an audio interface has two parts to it, really. It's a preamp or several preamps, and it also has an analog to digital and then digital to analog converter, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that preamp is going to amplify that low-level microphone signal. That signal strength, how much gain we amplify that low-level microphone signal by, is how we measure our recording level, and we use a decibel scale, and we use what's called a peak meter to measure that. We increase the gain in our preamp, and that signal strength is really how much signal we're sending through the pipeline. And when I say through the pipeline, we're talking about that analog to digital converter in our interface. And you will see this as maybe a USB cable or maybe a Thunderbolt cable, depends on what kind of audio interface you're using. But that preamp and how much gain we give that low-level microphone signal is how much signal strength we're sending through that pipeline. If you use a little bit of gain, then we're only sending a little bit of signal through that pipeline. If we increase the gain, we're sending a little more signal. And if we increase the gain to a proper recording level, we are as loud as we can get without ever peaking over -6. And that is, in my opinion, one of the best recording levels you can get for several reasons for voiceover recordings. Now, I dive deeper into that subject in my Optimum Recording Levels for Voiceover course, which I mentioned before. I'm going to have the link to that course in the description of this video, but let's continue. So we use the gain on our preamp to push that signal strength at the right level through that pipeline, and that eventually gets to our digital audio workstation through the USB or Thunderbolt cable from our audio interface, but that gets to our DAW, our recording software, and then we see that as the strength of the level that gets captured by our software. I want to just take a second here to kind of highlight this section of your signal flow. This is the input gain section of the entire signal flow. There's more to the signal flow, but I want to draw your attention to this section because when you use normalization, it's actually affecting this section of the signal flow. So after our voice is captured by our digital audio workstation at whatever level we set, there is an output. Now you've seen an output before, like on analog boards, right? These slider pots or these volume pots is what they're called. But most DAWs have a graphic representation of this output. But I want to point your attention to this because this is an output level. This is the level of signal after it's recorded that gets sent out from your DAW, okay? There's something called unity gain, which means we're not increasing or we're not decreasing the output at all. And unity gain is, there's usually a line on these output meters that represents unity gain. But if you're mixing a bunch of tracks together, this is where you actually do it in that output gain stage. But I just want to make sure you understand that there's a difference between the input gain from your preamp, and this is an output gain level. Now, wherever that output level is set is how much signal strength we're sending back through that pipeline. This is the digital to analog converter, but it's in that same USB cable. It goes through the same cable or the Thunderbolt cable. That's how much signal strength we're pushing through the pipeline again, ultimately back to our headphones or our speakers where we can monitor what's going on when we play back our audio from the DAW. And I want to draw your attention again because there's 3 different level controls here. We've got the preamp input gain on our audio interface. We've got the output signal strength that we can control with that volume pot slider. And then now we've got the headphones or speakers, those controls, and that's a different control or an output volume that'll add level to our headphones or our speakers. So we have to be concerned with the ratio between those 3 controls to make sure that we get an optimized recording quality at the end. And I'll give you just a quick example. If you feel like you need more volume in your earphones, you need to turn up the headphones volume on your monitor, not the gain in the preamp, because you could mess up your recording level. I just want to give you an example of what I mean. The ratio between those 3 controls, they have to be set at the right place, and that's another place where my optimum recording levels for Voiceover course could come in handy. So what is normalization? Well, normalizing is a process that you can do on your DAW, your digital audio workstation, the software on your computer to capture audio, where you can increase or decrease the input gain level of an audio file or a selected range of an audio file. And you can see it looks really kind of like a very simple plugin. And what you're doing is you're just telling it to go to a certain level. I'll illustrate that in a second. But again, we're talking about that one particular section of the signal flow. Normalization modifies the input gain level of an audio file after you record. So how does normalization work? Normalization increases or decreases the input gain level. Any of the audio that you select is affected. The entire selection is affected by the normalization process. Normalization identifies the highest peak of the selected region and sets that peak to the desired level or target. And it's also important to note here that normalization does not modify the tone or the sound of your audio file in any way. It's only modifying the input gain level. So in this particular illustration, I'm using Adobe Audition, and I want to show you how normalization works, how it could be used in Adobe Audition. I will say, though, that it's probably going to be the same, at least the concept is the same, and the procedure is the same in most DAWs. So yes, this is Adobe Audition, and if you don't use Adobe Audition, the normalization procedure is probably going to be very similar. So there's a couple different ways we can use normalization to modify this recording. This is my voice that I just recorded a little piece. Doesn't matter what it sounds like because we're just going to be dealing with the input gain level. If you look and scan across this entire recording, you can see this highest peak is the one here, and it registers above -6. The -6 line is here, if we were to look at the peak meter, which is the same as the numbers here on the right side. So -6 would be that line. So we've peaked over -6. And if my goal was to get a proper or optimum recording level for this voiceover recording, I would want to peak no higher than -6. So we can do a couple things and use the normalization procedure, or we could use the clip gain. And I'll show you to begin with, if you modify the clip gain, which is this knob right here, we are going to change. You could see how it changes the input gain of this file. And I can use this control to get that peak just about, or just under, or just at around -6. So there, we have modified the clip gain, and you can see now it's under -6. So that would be, for this particular recording, that would be an optimum recording level. So I'm going to undo that, and let's now undo amplify. And now let's, instead of using the manual clip gain adjustment, let's use the normalization processor. So if I go to amplitude and compression, I know some of this may be off the screen, but we go to normalize process, you'll see this little window pop up, and you can see this looks like a plugin, and it is a very simple plugin. So we could normalize to a particular number, and we want to do -6, but it may start out at -1, it may start out lower, whatever. But for this particular use of normalization, we want to try to get -6, and I'm going to put that exact number in there. And then if we push apply, so as you can see, we undid the manual normalization. We undid that on the file. So you could see this file here is still peaking over -6. This is the original recording. And now we're going to apply this normalization procedure. And there you go. It's adjusted, and now we're peaking exactly. It's precisely at -6. Again, bringing us to an optimum recording level for this clip. Now, I want to point one thing out. We've been talking about how normalization relates to setting a proper or optimum recording level. There are other uses for normalization, and so I want to make that clear. It's not just a good or bad thing, or can only be used for setting an optimum recording level. You know, it could be used for different parts of the mastering process. It could be used for just leveling a bunch of different clips. I think it's more important to know what normalization does and what it doesn't do, so you could use it as just one of the tools that you have. This time we're looking at Apple's Logic Pro, and we're going to be coming at this from a different angle. I've got a voiceover recording here that's actually a little bit lower than the optimum recording level, peaking at -6. This peak here, I believe, is -7.5 on the scale. And let's see. But higher, maybe 7.6. Okay, so what we can do then is manually raise the gain here. And in Logic Pro, this is how you do it. Let's see. A little bit higher, maybe. There we go. So we've raised the gain 1.6 decibels. And now when we play that peak and we play this peak here, it actually shows 6.0, which is the optimum recording level for this clip. So I can manually adjust it here. And then if we go under the function section here, normalize region gain, and it's very, very similar to the display that we had in Adobe Audition. We're going to affect this individual track. We'll use the peak algorithm, and we're looking for a peak target level of -6. And if we apply, you'll see this jumped up, and it should be exactly at -6 when we play it here. So when should I normalize? When should I use normalization? So here's how I use it. I believe it can be helpful to fine-tune your recording level for a few decibel increase or decrease if necessary. It's important, though, you need to use caution when you're using normalization on the certain dynamic content, and I'll give you some examples. Let's look at a particular situation where using normalizing or adjusting the clip gain to a particular target might not be a good idea. So in this particular situation, we've got a pretty steady recording level and a pretty steady level here, except for this one transient. This one part in this recording is much higher than the rest. This is an ultra dynamic situation, right? This is a lot higher than the rest of the entire recording. So, and what happens if you use the normalization function, or we just use the manual clip gain change, if we're to bring this to wherever -6 is, so the peak is happening at -6, the rest of the clip is still low. And if we do the opposite, if we bring the rest of the clip to where -6 kind of should be peaking on one of these other transients, so the rest of the file is at a good level, this peak is way too high. So because of the nature of normalization, because it affects the entire clip, this might not be the best case scenario where you'd want to use normalization to get yourself an optimum recording level. Okay, let's look at another scenario here where I have 3 segments, okay? These 3 different phrases of my voice were recorded at one recording level, but this first segment here was at a proper recording level. It came out to be a good level for my voice. This one, the second one, is more of a whisper, so the result was a lot lower than an optimum recording level. And then this last segment here was a very loud portion of my speech where I'm projecting or kind of yelling, okay? Let's say this, a good example here would be like maybe an animation type of a read, okay? So what do you do in a situation like this? Again, if we're to modify the clip gain, if I were to get, keeping the level where it's supposed to be here, peaking at about -6 for this first section, makes the second section too low and the third section too high. And if we do, let's say if we want to raise the input gain for this middle section to get that where it needs to be, our first and third sections are too high. And if we were to lower the clip gain to get this third section where it's supposed to be, approximately peaking at -6, I'd have to put a meter on here and check, but if these peaks were at -6 or where it's supposed to be for an optimum recording level, then the first and second sections are too low. But here's what you can do, and you're probably telling me through YouTube right now, hey Lenny, why don't you cut the clips? So there's a cut there, and then what you can do is use your clip gain to adjust each of these independently. So let's put that one where it originally was. We'll use this and increase that so it's peaking at -6. And then we, if this was where it originally was, it's supposed to be there. And then we lower that one down to about peaking at -6, so where the peaks. We'd have to use a meter to make sure we get them exactly at -6. But you can see, so we've adjusted independently these 3 sections by cutting it. So you still can use normalization or adjusting the clip gain to reach or fine tune your recording level, but we had to split these clips up. And it's just a factor of how normalization works. When you do normalization, it affects the entire clip. So you have to do some cutting if you're going to work with ultra dynamic content. Normalization can be used to get your recording level in the right place, and where I say it's the right place is as loud as possible without peaking at -6. That's the optimum recording level. However, using your preamp's input gain to reach a peak of -6 and no higher than that is going to yield a better overall quality, especially for more significant changes. So, for example, if you use normalization to fine-tune your gain a few dB up or down, that's fine. But if it's a significant change, like if you're using normalization, I have to boost it. After I recorded it, my recording level was too low. I got to boost it 6 or 10 dB. That's a significant change. You're better off re-recording and adjusting it properly with your input gain, because that's going to give you a better quality. Normalization does not increase or decrease the signal-to-noise ratio of a file that you've already recorded, but getting the proper recording level will help you get the best signal-to-noise ratio for your production if you properly adjust it with your gain. You could lower the noise floor that way. It's just the best way to do it. And again, in the course, Optimal Recording Levels for Voiceover, I go through all the details on why you should do it and how to do it as well. Most of the digital audio workstations are going to have this normalization feature. If you don't know where it is, if you've never used it before in your DAW, you just may have to dig a little bit, maybe look at the manual to find out exactly how to do it. Normalization can increase the loudness of your audio. However, there's a better way to do it. You could actually achieve more loudness with a limiter and a meter, which is what we call mastering, and that's a totally different process. I'm going to put a link to the in the description of this video to more courses that I have that can teach you all about mastering and getting a really loud level without distorting. Yes, you can do it with normalization, but there's a better way. Why do people suggest that you normalize? Well, I believe it's because it's a simple and easy way to increase the level of your audio. and set a target safely without getting into too much trouble. It's just kind of a crude way of doing it. And that's why I think, it's a simplified process, at least to get you to a certain level. But there are better ways to do it. And that's what I'm here for, to kind of teach you and show you some of the alternatives and some of the professional ways that I think you can optimize your audio. So normalization really is one of the tools that can help us get a great recording level, and a great recording level does a lot of things. It can give you the least amount of noise in your system. It optimizes the interaction with the processing effects like EQ and compression and other processors. When you hit those plugins at the right level, providing you've set the right recording level, it's kind of the sweet spot. You can get the best sound out of them that way. And if you're not hitting them at the proper level, some of them don't even work unless you're going into the plugins at the right recording level. Getting a proper recording level gives you massive leeway during the mixing process. So this is if you are adding music or two different voices, sound effects or something, and you're mixing all those things together, the right recording level really can help that process sound the best. And also, just one of the things I think that's important that we overlook is, if you have the proper recording level every time you record your voiceover, this standardizes your product, right? Your voiceover recordings are your products that you deliver to your clients. And standardizing those products means that if I have a great quality product that I offer my client, now it's also going to be very similar. It's going to be the same. It's going to be standardized if I do something for them next week, next year. So it gives you that the consistency and quality that we're all really looking for. I think that's a sign of a good quality product. If you need clarity on normalizing or any of the stuff that we touched on today, feel free to ask your question in the comments section of this video. I love the questions because not only do they help me learn myself, if I don't know the answer, it helps me really come up with new courses and new material and new videos to help the community. So by all means, leave a question. I'll never criticize. I'm always going to do my best to teach you, and don't ever be shy or feel like your question is too simple, because it's not. Because if you have that question, I'm sure other people have it too. LennyB.com is the place to get more information about my training courses. I've got free courses available. I have paid courses that are available. And then you could also get information on my custom processing preset service. I'm Lenny B, voiceover audio engineer. Thanks so much for watching.